All right, hi everyone. So as you can see, we've practiced with the different pencil qualities. We've got the 6B, the softest pencil in the pack, and the 4H, the hardest pencil in the pack. The hard pencils make a light mark and are really easy to erase if you don't press hard. The soft pencils are harder to erase, but they're beautiful when it comes to using a blending stump or blending tortillon to move the graphite around and make what's called blending. And the HB does that as well, but it does it also, but doesn't do it as well as the 6B, the 5B, or the 3B. And the 2H and the 4H do some blending too, but they're better for drawing lines and for very light values with blending. You can still blend them, but they're very soft. So they're really good for line work. These three are really good for line work, the HB, the 2H, and the 4H, whereas the Bs, the 3B, the 5B, and the 6B, or the 2B and the 5B and the 6B, are better for blending and making dark lines and making dark marks. You don't have to press hard when you're using them to make a dark mark. All you have to do is put them down, blend them around if you're going to, or you can put one layer upon another layer upon another layer real easily. Let's talk about what we're going to do in this space. This space we're going to focus on line qualities, not pencil qualities, but the qualities that lines can take. So it doesn't matter really which of the pencils we use. So I suggest and recommend that you use the HB pencil for some of them, and then I'm going to recommend that you pick up a 5B or 6B for a little contrast in the quality of the line that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start us off with my HB pencil. Remember, keeping your pencils nice and sharp is really important to doing good work for the project. All right. So I'm going to zoom us in here, straighten us up a little bit. There we go. And pan over to the side a little bit there. All right. So with the HB pencil, remember the labels are right here, right? At the top of this space, just underneath that line that we divided the two spaces apart, I want you to write its label is line, L-I-N-E, qualities. Don't take up too much space because we need the space to do the work of line qualities. And then we're going to do some other labels eventually too. But down at the bottom of the paper, so I know it's yours and not somebody else's, please write your full name, first and last name, please, and your period number. I like to put a little dot or circle that is like a degrees mark to represent period number. So I put 0 period just because I don't teach 0 this time. That way I'm not going to confuse anybody, I hope, by having a label that isn't for a class I teach. All right, so we're going to be doing some other labeling and using this pencil for a lot of the marks that we make to discover different line qualities. And we're going to discover them as opposites. It's easier to think of them as opposites. So our first one I want to talk about is light and dark. If we draw very evenly without too much pressure and just draw a straight line, let's make it go about half of the distance down, and we'll leave the other half for some lines going this way. So I've got a line there now that is fairly light. It stands out, but it's not too dark, and that's because I used an HB pencil, right? Now let's, just like we did before, we're going to press a little bit harder. Don't press so hard that you break your pencil. And you can see, like we did above, the second line, because it had more pressure, is darker and stands out more than the first line does, right? So that's our first two different line qualities. So let's label them. The first one was light, L-I-G-H-T, and that's this one, and dark. And I like to separate them with a slash to just make sure that we understand that it's not one term, but two different terms. And I'm going to label it by pointing an arrow to it. You don't have to put the arrow on there. I just wanted to remind you. All right, so those are two different line qualities. We can have a light line, we can have a dark line. And we can use different pencils to do different variations of light and dark too, as you learned up above, right? Now, so these line qualities are how you change the inherent qualities of your pencil. The way you press with them, the way you move them around on your paper. Those are the things that take the pencil and turn it into a different quality. And the direction it goes creates a line. We can draw our line in one direction or in multiple directions, and they create different kinds of lines. But we're talking mostly about qualities of lines. Thick and thin, rough and smooth, that sort of thing. And that's our next one. We already did light and dark. Let's talk about thick versus thin. So I'm going to put my pencil on its edge. Remember we did that up above with the tip and all the way to the wood, holding it like this in your hand. We're going to drag that downward about the same distance that we did with the first set of lines. And let's go ahead and label it right away. That is a thick line. Thick. Right? It's wider than these two lines, broader, thicker. Okay? Now if we use it on its tip, we've done that before, right? With the other work. It's a thin line. It has, so remember slash separates them. It has less distance from side to side than this one did. It's narrower, right? So, oops, I labeled it wrong. I wrote thick. It should be thin, right? Toop. Okay, so thick versus thin. So this is a thin line. Let's do our next quality lines. And I want to remind you that we can change what pencil we use, and that'll vary how thick and how thin these go too, and how much they stand out. So if I used a 6B pencil to draw that line, it could be deeper, darker, and it might even be thicker because the pencil can cover more area more evenly. Let's go with our next set. It has to do with the quality of its coverage. Is it rough or is it smooth? So let's do a smooth line first. We can use it on its tip and just continuously press it evenly. We can use it on its tip, on its side, and we can continuously press it evenly. Those are both smooth lines. All right, so let's label them smooth, S-M-O-O-T-H. That is an S. And that's for both of them. Okay, they're smooth. They didn't change. There's no abrupt change from one quality to another. Whereas if we move them with pressure or in direction, we can make them look rough and agitated. Okay? So if I use my pencil on its side, since I have it on the side, if I press a little harder and then less hard and then harder and less hard, I create what is a little rougher look. It's one continuous line, but it's thicker and thinner, depending on pressure. I can also change it by how I hold it too, okay? So the pressure change or a directional change, like that, changes its smoothness. So these are rough lines. We could do it with the tip too. It doesn't have to be with the side. More pressure, less pressure, more pressure, less pressure, more pressure. Okay? So these are all rough. R-O-U-G-H. And that's for all of those. That's rough. Okay? And that one too. So they change in how thick and thin, light and dark they are in one line. It's not two different lines, but in one line. So this is one continuous line. It just changes in its appearance, in its quality. Okay? And then our next set is to do straight or curved. They are two opposing ones too. We're kind of running out of room here, so we're just going to do some straight lines up above here. Straight lines can be vertical, they can be horizontal, they can be diagonal, they can be short, they can be dotted, they can be really short, but they go one direction. If I don't know that I told you this, but a line's definition, a really simple definition for a line, is a point that moves. Well, if I put my pencil down and then I move it, that's a line. Well, I've got some straight lines there, right, because the direction didn't change. But if I change it, then it can become what is called a curved line. Let's label this one first, right? These are the straight lines, S-T-R-A-I-G-H-T. That's these lines right there. And then let's do some curved lines. Curved lines have a directional change while you're moving them, while you're drawing them. And it's usually a gradual change. It can be a big curve like that. It can be a slight curve like that. It can curve upward or downward. So these are all curved lines, and they could be curved multiple times like that. Okay? So that's still one continuous line. It's a point that moves, but it gradually changes its direction as it moves across. That's called curved. Okay, and that's this whole set right here. All right, and those are opposites too, right? So each of these sets are opposites, but there's a light quality, a dark quality, a thick quality, a thin quality, a rough quality, a smooth quality, a straight, or a curved. They're all different line qualities that express the pressure and the motion, the movement of that line, its direction. Now we can change our line quality in multiple ways. So in this space right here above where I've written my name and underneath these things, where I hope you left some room too, we can draw some lines that are similar to these, but we use a light, thin, smooth, straight line, and we can change it, right? So we can do all of those as one thing. So let's try it. Here's a light, thick line, very light, and then I'm going to change my pressure and my direction, and all of a sudden it's becoming a rougher line and a darker line, and then I'm going to go to dark. So in one line I can change its quality dramatically, and it can curve too. All right. So that's one continuous line. It's how I held my pencil and how I moved it around that helped to make it visually interesting. And that's why we use different lines in art. If we use different lines, it helps us to express ourselves, and it helps to make the artwork more interesting. If we just used this kind of line right there, that HB, that kind of middle gray HB in everything we did, it'd be kind of boring to look at. So as an artist, we use variations of lines with different pencils to make more visual interest. And that helps me to tell my story. So that's the end of this video. We're going to do some more practice with your pencils, and then we have an assignment coming up. Finish this up and take your pictures if you are working on your own.